My name is Nadia. I am 36 years old, and I was born in a small city in Ukraine called Poltava, where the summers are warm and long and the streets smell like linden trees in June. I came to the United States when I was 22, alone, with one suitcase and the address of a woman I had never met written on a folded piece of paper in my coat pocket. I had no plan beyond surviving the first week. I had no idea that 14 years later I would be sitting in a house in Portland, Oregon, trying to explain to my 9-year-old daughter why her father no longer lived with us. This is the story of those 14 years. All of it, the beautiful parts, and the parts I am still not sure I have fully forgiven myself for. I left Ukraine because of a man, not the man I eventually married, a different man, an earlier mistake, the kind that feels like love when you are 21 and have never been very far from home. His name was Andriy, and he was charming and careless in equal measure, the kind of person who made everything feel exciting and nothing feel safe. We were together for 2 years. When it ended, badly, publicly, in the way that endings in small cities always are, where everyone knows before you have finished crying, I decided I needed to go somewhere so far away that the embarrassment couldn't follow me. My aunt had a contact in Portland, a Ukrainian woman named Helena, who rented rooms to newly arrived immigrants and helped them find their footing. The arrangement was informal, based entirely on trust and community connection, which is a system that works better than it sounds. I called my aunt. I got Helena's address. I booked the cheapest flight I could find. And 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a window seat watching the lights of Kyiv disappear beneath the clouds, telling myself that running away from something could also be running toward something if you chose to think about it that way. Helena's house was on a quiet street in northeast Portland, a blue 2-story with a garden full of tomatoes that she tended with a seriousness usually reserved for more important things. There were 3 other women living there when I arrived, one from Moldova, one from Georgia, one from Poland. And we shared a kitchen and a bathroom and a common language of displacement that didn't need many words to be understood. We were all, in various ways, starting over. That solidarity was the first thing that made Portland feel survivable. My English was functional, but awkward, the kind learned mostly from textbooks and American movies, which meant I could hold a conversation, but regularly said things that were technically correct and socially strange. Helena helped me find a job at a cleaning company that serviced office buildings downtown. The work was physical and unglamorous, and I was grateful for every hour of it, because every hour meant money, and money meant the next month's rent and the month after that. And if I kept enough months in front of me, I could avoid thinking too carefully about the ones behind me. I had been in Portland for about 7 months when I met Owen. He came into the coffee shop on Burnside Street, where I had started working a second job on weekend mornings, and he ordered a black coffee and a blueberry muffin and said thank you in a way that seemed like he actually meant it, which sounds like a small thing and isn't. He came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. On the 3rd Saturday, he asked my name and told me his, and we talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. The weather, a book he was reading, whether the coffee shop's muffins were as good as they used to be. And when he left, I found myself hoping he would come back the following week. He did. He always did, for the next 2 months. And somewhere in those Saturday morning conversations, I started looking forward to. Saturday, in a way, I hadn't looked forward to anything in a long time. Owen was 30, a landscape architect, originally from a small town in Oregon, who had moved to Portland for work and stayed because he liked the city and had put down enough roots to make leaving complicated. He was patient and funny and genuinely curious about people in a way that felt rare. He asked me about Ukraine with actual interest, not the vague performative interest people sometimes show to make themselves seem worldly. He wanted to know what Poltava looked like in winter. He asked about my family. He listened to the answers. We started meeting outside the coffee shop, walks along the river, dinner at small restaurants. One afternoon in October, we drove out to the Columbia River Gorge and stood at the top of a waterfall in the wind. And he reached over and took my hand, and I let him. And we stood like that for a long time without saying anything, and it felt like something beginning. I want to tell you who Owen was then, at 30, before everything else, because I think it matters. He was the kindest person I had met since leaving Ukraine. Not kind in a performed way, not kind in a way that expected something in return, but quietly and consistently kind in the way of someone for whom it was simply a habit of character. He was the person who noticed when I was tired without being told, who texted to ask if I got home safely after late shifts, who, when I told him one evening about Andrei and the humiliation that had sent me across an ocean, listened without judgment and said, "That sounds like it was really painful," which was so simple and so exactly the right thing that I cried a little, right there at the table, and he handed me a napkin without making it a big moment. I fell in love with him the way you fall in love when you have been hurt before and are paying close attention, slowly, with a lot of internal negotiation, checking at every stage whether what you were feeling was real or just need dressed up as something more. By the time I admitted it to myself, it had already been true for months. We moved in together after a year and a half. We got married 2 years after that, in a small ceremony in the garden of a friend's house in the hills outside Portland, with 20 people and good food, and Helena crying in the front row, because she felt, she told me later, like she had watched the whole thing happen from the beginning. My mother flew over from Ukraine for the wedding. She held Owen's face in both her hands when she met him, which is something she does with people she approves of, and said something to him in Ukrainian that I translated as, "Take care of my daughter," though it was actually somewhat stronger than that. Our daughter was born the following year. We named her Lena, after my grandmother. She came into the world loudly and has not significantly quieted down since, which is a trait she gets from my side of the family and which Owen found endearing in a way that I found endearing in him. We were happy. I want to say that clearly and mean it, because it is true. We were happy for several years in the straightforward way that people are happy when the life they have built is functioning the way they hoped, and the person they built it with is still, more or less, the person they fell in love with. The change in Owen was not sudden. I have thought about this many times since, looking for the moment I could point to, the clear before and after. I have not found one. What I found, looking back, was a series of small shifts that individually meant nothing and collectively meant everything. He started working longer hours, which was explainable. His firm had taken on a major project. The pressure was real. He became quieter in the evenings, which was understandable. Exhaustion is real too. He stopped initiating conversations about small things, the kind of conversations that are the actual tissue of a shared life, the ones that aren't about anything important and are therefore about everything. I told myself these things were temporary, that this was a difficult season and it would pass. I told myself this for almost a year, which is how long it takes to become fluent in the language of denial when you are motivated enough to learn it. The thing that finally made me stop telling myself was a Friday evening in November when I came home from picking Lena up from school to find Owen sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop closed in front of him and an expression on his face that I had never seen there before. Not sad exactly, not angry. Something more frightening than either. Emptied out, like a room someone has already started moving out of. I put Lena in front of the television with a snack, and I came back to the kitchen, and I sat down across from him, and I asked what was wrong. He said nothing was wrong. I looked at him for a long moment and said, "Owen, I've been watching something be wrong for months. Please don't tell me nothing is wrong." He looked at the table, Then he looked at me and he said, "I don't know who I am anymore." That sentence sat in the air between us, and I didn't know what to do with it. I asked him what he meant. He tried to explain, haltingly, in the way of someone who has been trying to find the words for a long time and still isn't sure he has the right ones. He said he felt like he had built a life that looked exactly right from the outside, and that some days he looked at it and felt nothing. That he loved Lena completely and without question. That he cared about me. And that somewhere in the last year he had started waking up at 3 a.m. with a feeling he couldn't name, a kind of pressure, like something in him was pushing against the walls of the life he was living, and he didn't understand why. I listened to all of this very carefully, and when he finished, I said, "Are you in love with someone else?" He said no. Immediately, with something that looked like genuine surprise that I had asked. "No." "Then what is this?" I asked,